In Episode 5, Operationalize Authentication, Authorization, Accounting, and Governance, we connect these ideas directly to the behaviors engineering teams rely on every single day. Many professionals treat AAA as a conceptual trio and governance as a separate managerial layer. Yet in real systems, they operate as one continuous thread running through every interaction a user or service has. When you view them as habits rather than abstract categories, they begin to feel like part of ordinary engineering craft. That perspective not only strengthens your understanding for the exam, but also prepares you to recognize weak patterns and missing safeguards in real environments. The goal here is to make these concepts instinctive so you can use them fluidly in scenarios, reviews, and design conversations. Authentication is the first touchpoint in this chain, and it rests on factors, strength considerations, and the context that surrounds each verification event. Factors include something you know, something you have, and something you are, with multi-factor arrangements combining items from at least two categories. Strength relates to how resistant those factors are to theft, guessing, replay, or cloning, and it varies widely between static passwords, hardware tokens, and biometrics. Context-aware verification adds intelligence by examining conditions such as device reputation, location, time of access, and recent behavior patterns to raise or lower trust levels dynamically. When authentication is framed as a layered, adaptive decision rather than a single gate, its role becomes clearer in designing resilient identity flows. Authorization then decides what an authenticated entity is allowed to do, and several models describe how these permissions are granted and enforced. Discretionary access control gives resource owners the ability to manage permissions, which can support flexibility but often creates inconsistent patterns. Mandatory access control imposes strict, centrally defined classifications and rules, typically used in high-assurance environments where leakage cannot be tolerated. Role-based control groups permissions around job functions, which works well for predictable organizational structures. Attribute-based control evaluates a richer set of characteristics, such as department, clearance level, risk score, or device posture, to decide access dynamically. Understanding these models helps you interpret scenario constraints and choose the authorization pattern that aligns with stability, adaptability, and governance expectations. Least privilege and separation of duties bring these models into real workflows, helping teams minimize unnecessary access without disrupting productivity. Least privilege means granting just enough authority to perform required tasks and no more, which requires both clarity about job responsibilities and processes to adjust access as those responsibilities change. Separation of duties prevents one person or component from having unchecked power, forcing critical actions to require dual approval, independent validation, or segmented authority. These principles do not exist to slow teams down. They exist to limit the blast radius of mistakes, misconfigurations, or malicious acts. When aligned with practical workflow needs, they support safer operations without creating constant obstacles. Accounting completes the AAA trio by ensuring that events, timestamps, integrity, and retention rules together produce credible evidence about what happened and when. Accounting records should establish who performed an action, what was changed or accessed, the success or failure outcome, and the exact time anchored to a consistent, traceable source such as a synchronized clock service. Integrity ensures logs cannot be altered without detection, while retention policies specify how long records remain available for investigations, audits, and compliance. When accounting is designed with clarity and precision, it becomes a powerful verification tool that supports every other security control. Integrating AAA into services, application programming interfaces, and administrative paths means applying these ideas at every entry point rather than only at user-facing layers. Services often authenticate using secrets, certificates, or tokens, and their authorization decisions may be enforced by gateways, policy engines, or embedded logic. Administrative paths require even stricter controls because they typically operate with elevated privileges that could cause widespread harm if misused. Ensuring that all these interactions follow the same disciplined patterns avoids the common problem where public endpoints are well protected, but internal or administrative pathways lag behind. Identity governance then carries these principles through the entire life cycle of an account, beginning with onboarding and continuing through transfers, role changes, and eventual offboarding. Onboarding should assign access based on defined roles and attributes, not one-off exceptions. Transfers require timely adjustments that both add needed privileges and remove those no longer appropriate. Offboarding must revoke all access reliably and promptly, including secondary accounts, cached credentials, and any integration keys tied to the person's identity. Periodic reviews serve as a corrective layer, validating that accumulated permissions still match job responsibilities. When lifecycle steps are consistent, predictable, and evidence-producing, identity governance moves from theory to trustworthy practice. Secrets handling is another area where operational realities test the strength of these principles. Rotation ensures that long-lived credentials do not become quiet liabilities, while revocation cuts off exposure when compromise is suspected. Emergency access, often called break glass, requires a controlled process where elevated privileges can be granted quickly but are tightly logged, time-bound, and reviewed afterward. Without these disciplines, secrets become invisible weaknesses that attackers can exploit long after the original purpose has faded. Strong processes transform secrets from fragile tokens into managed security assets. Privilege creep is one of the most persistent challenges in identity environments, emerging slowly as people change roles, take on temporary responsibilities, or receive ad hoc permissions. Preventing it requires patterns that reduce reliance on manual discretion, including structured request flows, periodic attestations from managers or application owners, and automated comparison between assigned permissions and known role definitions. Automation plays a crucial role by flagging anomalies, detecting unused privileges, and enforcing expirations for temporary access. Over time, these mechanisms help maintain clean permission sets and reduce the risk that dormant access will become an unnoticed path into critical systems. Because enforcement can drift silently over time, validating these controls requires logs, sampling, and targeted tests designed to confirm that AAA principles actually function. Log analysis reveals whether authentication failures are tracked, whether authorization decisions follow policies, and whether sensitive tasks produce complete accounting entries. Sampling lets you verify a portion of permissions, lifecycle events, or break glass usages without reviewing the entire population. Targeted control tests, such as attempting to perform actions outside expected roles, confirm whether guardrails hold under real conditions. These checks transform lofty intentions into measurable assurance. Governance reporting then translates identity activities into metrics leadership understands and values. Instead of technical jargon, reports highlight trends such as reduction in dormant accounts, faster offboarding times, improved review completion rates, or fewer privilege escalations outside normal workflow. These metrics matter because they represent reduced operational risk and increased organizational discipline, which are outcomes executives can readily appreciate. When reporting is clear and aligned to strategic goals, Governance ceases to be a compliance burden and becomes a meaningful contributor to organizational trust. A practical scenario brings these ideas to life. A contractor joins a team, changes roles mid-project, and eventually leaves while retaining unnoticed access. Authentication may still accept old tokens. Authorization may still grant privileges tied to past duties. And accounting may reveal a surprising number of unused but active permissions. Lifecycle governance might show gaps in communication between project managers and identity administrators, and privilege creep might be evident from accumulated rights no longer relevant. Working through this scenario exposes how failures at multiple points, not just onboarding or offboarding, combine into a lingering vulnerability. It also shows how strong AAA and governance processes prevent this risk from persisting. By the time you reach a mini-review, you can restate the authorization models, describe the life cycle from onboarding to offboarding, explain how logging and accounting create assurance, and connect governance to measurable improvements. You can articulate how secrets, privilege management, and enforcement checks form a coherent system rather than scattered tactics. Speaking these elements aloud reinforces the clarity you need for exam scenarios that weave identity concepts with operational constraints. The conclusion for Episode 5 centers on action. Document one improvement you can implement immediately in your environment, even if small. That improvement could be a more disciplined rotation schedule, a clearer role definition, or a simple attestation reminder for a high-risk system. The next step is to schedule an access review aligned with your governance rhythms. With each cycle, AAA and governance move from exam topics into daily habits, strengthening your security posture and deepening your confidence as both a practitioner and an exam candidate. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.